Students, now let's learn about farmers' movements. What are the human rights violations or any rights, any fundamental rights violations or basic things that farmers should receive and they would have not been given those rights or rewards that they're supposed to get, then they would come together and protest. It is mainly related to taxes, the relationship they would have with the landlords in terms of tenancy and so on. All of these things are the main causes of farmers' movements. There are a lot of incidents that take place that exploit farmers, that are very unfair to them. So all of that discontentment, dissatisfaction, when they come and express saying, no, this is wrong, we want our rights, those movements are farmers' movements. The farmers' movements, where did it begin? It began with the denial of land tax. Later, they tried to express their problem in the face of economic problems. How do farmers face economic problems? Let's say they grow a crop. The rice in the cities is sold at 40 rupees per kg, 45 rupees per kg. But the farmer would just be getting about 10 rupees or 15 rupees, and a lot of middlemen will be taking a lot of money for profits. So, is it fair? Do you think the farmers will not be suffering economically? So a lot of these economic problems led them to protest and led to a lot of social movements. During the 1980s, among all social movements, farmers' movements was the most important. Students, you may get confused. In 1980s was popular even for women's movements, but it's very important for farmers' movements. During the year 1970, D. Devarajars became the Chief Minister of Karnataka. He was a very visionary, he was very forward-looking as the Chief Minister. He said that we would bring in a lot of social reformations and his focus was the farmer. He started to bring in legal measures where the law supported the farmers, so that he could free these downtrodden people from the shackles of the caste system. Measures were taken to free the farmers from the clutches of tenancy system and bonded labor. What is tenancy system? Let's say you are a farmer. You have taken this piece of land for rent and you have committed that I would pay so and so rent and I will use this farm. So there are basic rights that you should have, that okay, for 1 full year you can use till when the crop comes. The owner suddenly can't decide, oh, get out, you've not paid rent for 2 months. So there are no rights as a tenant. So reforms in tenancy. Let me give you an example. So there is a person by name Shekhar living in this village. He sees that there is a boy called Adi. His mother needs a lot of money suddenly because there is a emergency health situation. But she has no money, so she comes to Shekhar saying, I need money, please help me out. Shekhar is like, if you let Adi be with me as a bonded labor, I will give you the money. What is the meaning of that? So let's say Shekhar gave her 50,000 rupees for her medical emergency. Adi remains as a slave. For full life, he does not have to pay Adi again, and Adi remains a slave under Shekhar. So that system was bonded labor. Was it right? Is it even human? No. So this chief minister removed bonded labor. He took legal actions. He put laws in place against bonded labor and tenancy system. Apart from releasing the farmer from debt, what is the meaning of debt? So we hear this saying often, a farmer is born in debt, lives in debt and lies in debt. Debt means loan. A farmer may have taken a loan to get his daughter married. Then he'll take another loan to repay this loan, and the cycle keeps on continuing. So this problem of loan for farmers is a very long term and it's there throughout their life. So he tried to release farmers from debt. The minister, Mr. Basavalingappa, tried to eradicate the practice of carrying night soil on the head. What is night soil? Human excretion is called night soil. So farmers are forced to carry it on their head to dispose it in an appropriate place because there was no developed drainage system. So he said, no, this is not right. We should ban the system immediately. In the later duration, farmers' movements were organized for what? To attract the attention of the government on various problems faced by the farmers. The government tried to tackle the farmers' movements as politically motivated movements by using police, by ordering firing and lathi charge. So, whenever farmers' movements, you all may have read even recently in news, so when farmers have protested, the police have gone and lathi charged these farmers. In 1980, farmers of Naragund revolted against the government's attempts to use force against these farmers. Now, there was one such moment in the year 1980 where in this place called Naragund. So, the government used violent force like lathi charge to prevent these farmers from protesting. They were trying to force these farmers to stop protesting. The farmers' revolt of Naragund was not only a protest of high-handedness of the police, it was also a total pro-farmer movement. But it was a movement that was mainly in support of rights of the farmers. After the Naragund revolt, the farmers' movement's leader, Professor M.D. Nanjundaswamy, a socialist, he founded Karnataka State Rights Sangha. This organization came into existence with the presidency of Rudrappa, a Gandhian from Shivamogga. These names are important, students, please learn it. Professor M.D. Nanjundaswamy was named as the convener and N.D. Sundaresh was named as the secretary of the organization. It put forth conditions. What conditions it put forth to the government saying, these are our wishes for farmers, please fulfill them. Let's learn them now. First one. Due to unscientific price fixation, the farmers are in distress. So, the government should stop seizure of properties of the farmers for their debts. Let me explain this to you in detail. So, students, the government fixes the price of certain commodities. Like for example, they may decide that onions will sell at 40 rupees per kg only. But is this scientific? Is this the value of the crop? They said no, it is unscientific. And because of this, who faces the loss? Farmers were facing losses. And because they were facing losses, they could not repay the loans that they had taken. Now, because they could not repay the loan, the money lender who had given them money, or if they had taken loan from a bank, the bank came and took off their lands. Now, these farmers became landless. Where will they grow crops? Where will they go and work? So, this led to a lot of problems. So, they said the price fixation is unscientific. This is leading farmers to be in debt and their property should not be seized. Because properties are being seized, the farmers are in debt. Villages which lack infrastructure should be developed immediately. There are so many scientific developments that have come forth in farming, but the villages have not been so developed to take advantage of all these scientific techniques. So, infrastructure means like build good roads, provide them adequate facilities with tractors and all other agricultural equipments so that they can also take advantage of scientific farming. Villages should get their share out of the resources extracted. If there is a factory being built and there's a lot of development coming in a village, all the village members should get advantage because of those resources. Levy system should be stopped. What is levy? Levy is a fine or a penalty that the government puts when you fail to pay tax. Let's say you have a land and you fail to pay tax. The government will seize the land and call that penalty as levy. So, they said levy should be stopped and many other demands were placed. Even today, the farmers' movements are going on. Very recently, the farmers' protests against the Mahadayi and Kaveri river water sharing judgments of the court took place. So, it's a river and the water of this river is going to be shared between different parts of the Karnataka state and Tamil Nadu state. So, there was protest by farmers because they felt the division was unfair. Now, students, this brings us to the end of farmer movements. You all should learn all the names that were mentioned. You all should know at least 2 to 3 of the demands that they placed, and you should also understand Why? What is the reason farmers were protesting for? Now let's look at labor movements. Labor are those people who go to work and maybe at workplace they have not been treated fairly. For example, they may have been subjugated to rules like, oh, you have to work 15 hours a day. You will not get leave. There may be so many problems of laborers. They may be getting their wages or salaries at a very later date instead of getting an on-time payment and so on. Now we will look at labor movements and how it brought in equality. Labor movements or trade union represents the ordinary workers. Labor movement is a movement demanding better working conditions and pay for workers along with the demand for implementation of labor related legal provisions. So they should get a minimum wage. They should get their pay on time. They should have basic facilities. Like for example, working in a firework industry, there is no regard given to the safety. In coal mine, under such hot temperatures, under such miserable conditions, without any safety equipment, they would send them inside a coal mine, and it leads to so many injuries and even death in some cases. So there should be a minimum criterion that should be there. The movement that is held through the trade unions is also called the labor movements. In many countries, trade unions have also become the political parties. Pro-labor philosophy. Pro-labor means in favor, in support of the rights of the laborers, have been evolving in opposition to exploitation of capitalism. So in capitalism, they don't really care. They are not very supportive of laws that favor the labor. They are against it. So what is the opposite of pro-labor? Pro-capitalism. In European countries, due to industrialization, there was a drop in the employment available in agricultural sector and more employment was there in the industrial sector. This resulted in migration of workers from where? Rural to urban areas where there were more industries, from agricultural labor to industrial labor. This led to over-exploitation because there were so many people available for work. They started exploiting them. They started looking at who will do maximum work with the lowest amount of wages. This forced them to work for longer hours. The laborers became aware of this exploitation and they organized in opposing these developments. They said, united we will stand and we will oppose such exploitation. During the 19th century, worker parties and trade unions started organizing workers all over the world. The International Working Men's Association is the first labor union established in London in the year 1864. Learn the name, students. For 1 mark as a fill in the blank it may come. Main aim of this association was to protect the interest of workers. Name and the purpose both are very, very important. They wanted to implement 8-hour shift of working only. 8 hours. Your working hours should only be for 8 hours, not 10, not 12, not 14, not 16, just 8 hours. The labor movement spread to other parts of the world during the later part of the 19th century. In order to protect the social security, what do we mean by social security? Basic benefits to the labor. Like they should have proper conditions in which they work. They must get medical claim in case something goes wrong and so on. So to protect the social security of workers, the government of India implemented an act in 1923 to ensure social security. Students, for India, since this act is related to India from examination point of view, it's very, very important. So what did this act do? It helped the Indian trade unions. The various associations could gain legislative recognitions. So if there were trade unions in India and they believed that this law could be followed or this law should be made, they got that recognition because of this act of 1923. After this, many labor unions were started and they have continued to protect the rights of the workers. There are many labor unions that continue their work even to this day. Now students, we will learn about untouchability prevention movement. We have learned many times about this topic in different segments of your social science textbook. Now we will look at social movements that were aimed at stopping or ending this practice of untouchability. What is untouchability? It's a very inhuman practice of stratified society. What is a stratified society? We've already learned in the chapter of social stratification. Before the implementation of constitution, the ideas like untouchables should be untouched, should not stand next to him, were in vogue. Like it was like a fashion. Like, oh, that well, from that well an untouchable drank water. We should not drink water from there. Oh, this is a restaurant, this is a hotel. An untouchable person cannot cook here. An untouchable person is come and eaten here, so we should not go to this restaurant to eat. So there were such practices that were there. So after the constitution came into place, it banned such practices. Untouchability prevention movement is a movement aimed at achieving eradication, removal, end of the practice of untouchability and attacks on the untouchable people. It's a movement against the caste-based social exploitation. So they may ask you, what kind of exploitation is untouchability? It's a caste-based social exploitation. The untouchable communities have been fighting for so many years for their rights, and now we will understand how this movement took place, what happened. Students, now let us look at the history of the untouchable movement. Like, who started this? What did they do? Were there any other people who were in support of this and so on? Let's look at it. So the history of untouchable movement goes back to the 19th century. Jyotiba Phule, we've heard this name before. Where? Yes, in history, in social and religious reform movements. He organized a movement including untouchables and the backward classes. So what did he do? He aimed through this movement to oppose the Varna system and resist the dominance of caste and the social system. With the same, various movements were started in states like Karnataka, Maharashtra and Andhra Pradesh during the year 1917. He opposed, he said no, just because you're Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras, no, we are not divided, we can all be united as human beings. In 1925, Periyar Ramaswamy, we read about the details of this movement in social religious reform movements. He started the self-importance movement in Tamil Nadu. So we read about Jyotiba Phule. Now we have taken the example of Periyar Ramaswamy. Next we are looking at Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. With the idea of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar on gender discrimination, untouchability, the movement became very powerful. So started by Jyotiba Phule, given full force and energy by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. In the Round Table Conference, what is the Round Table Conference? We have to go back to the Gandhian era when we talk about the Round Table Conference. In 1930, Ambedkar called for the untouchables to become the rulers of India. He continued his fight for the rights of the Dalits. He continued to assert, he was very sure in saying that yes, we are all equal. He fought for the rights of untouchables and women throughout his life. He started a periodical. Periodical means a magazine which comes on a monthly basis called Mookanayaka and was instrumental in creating a lot of movements against the practice of untouchability. Gandhiji considered the liberation from untouchability along with national freedom. So he used to say, freedom is not just freedom from the British rule. Freedom is also freedom from all of these unfair social practices. That is real freedom. Even today, many organizations and associations are very active in their work to eradicate untouchability. So students, this brings us to the end of the chapter. Now let us solve the questions on page 71. Environmental movements mean, what is the meaning? The scientific protest aimed at curtailing the various activities that are polluting the earth. Narmada Bachao movement was led by Medha Patkar. Dr. Shivaram Karant opposed the establishment of Dash nuclear power plant, Kaiga nuclear power plant in the Karwar district. Women movements means movement that oppose the patriarchal values exploiting women. Next, what are the models of mob behavior? What is mob? It is a collection of people which collects in a place and indulges in temporary thinking, demands and the related emotional expression. The expression is called mob behavior. Many times unrestrained behavior of people gathered in a mob reflects social shortcomings of a society. It expresses their dissatisfaction with many social institutions. People express their dissatisfaction with government policies, attitudes and decisions on specific programs of the government. What is women's movements? Give examples. It's a movement that opposes the patriarchal values exploiting women and the creation of inequality on the basis of gender. Example, dowry harassment, rape, kidnap, acid attack, etc. Examples of women's movement can be the movement that they did for stopping alcoholism prohibition movements. Explain the nature of mob. Mob again is a collection of people which collects in a place and indulges in temporary thinking, demands and the related emotional expression. This is called mob behavior. Next, explain the environmental movements, their meaning and nature. Environmental movements are the scientific movements aimed at preserving the biological system. The scientific protest aimed at curtailing the various activities that are polluting the earth, air and water are environmental movements. They never appear instantly. They are a result of many years of exploitation of nature and tribal people. So students, this brings us to the end of the chapter, social movements. If I have to give you an advice, I would say as follows. Spend each day where you all learn 2 complete movements. Like on day 1, you all can do environmental movements and women's movements. Then you can do farmers movements and movements related to untouchability and so on. This way, when you break it down, it becomes very easy to learn. Okay students, thank you.